I will now begin the third lecture on food labeling and advertising regulations in South Korea. I am Dr. Danny Jun, the CEO of FSIRI, Food Science Information Research Institute. Our institute specializes in providing lectures, consulting and OTT services related to food. In the second lecture, we learned about product name labeling method. In this third lecture, let's take a closer look at ingredient labeling. In more detail, we will study ingredient labeling method, selection of ingredient names, indication of raw material names, composite raw materials, labeling of food additives used in the food product, and emphasis on ingredients. This is about ingredient labeling method. When frozen roasted sweet potatoes are simply thawed and dried to manufacture a product, the ingredient name can be labeled as sweet potatoes or frozen roasted sweet potatoes. The 100% label can be used when there are no other ingredients remaining besides the sweet potatoes in the final product. The content of the ingredients should be indicated based on the amount of the respective ingredient that remains in the final product. Therefore, it is not advisable to label it as 90% on the main label when 89.9% of banana juice is used. If the raw materials are extracted in water, with solid residues removed and only the broth used in the final product, the ingredient name can be labeled based on the raw materials used to make the broth. You can list them as anchovies, green onions, garlic. Or, you can be labeled as anchovy broth, followed by parentheses containing anchovies, green onions, and garlic. If individually packaged seasonings and broth are intermediates, all the ingredients used in the production of seasonings and broth including sausages should be listed in descending order of their presence. Here, ingredients, such as individually packaged seasonings and broths, can also be labeled differently. They can be labeled as seasoning and broth, respectively, followed by parentheses containing the list of ingredients used in descending order of the most remaining amount. The ingredient name can be labeled based on the raw materials used to make the broth. Intermediates are ingredient mixtures created for the manufacturing process efficiency, while composite raw materials is a food product manufactured using two or more types of raw materials, which are reported to or declared to regulatory authorities, and are used as ingredients for other foods. Composite raw materials have distinct regulations for ingredient labeling methods. This is about selection of ingredient names. For products manufactured using milk and lactobacilluses as raw materials through the manufacturing process, the ingredient labeling should indicate milk and lactobacillus. However, in the case where cream is separated from milk during the manufacturing process of the product, it is also permissible to label the ingredients as milk cream and lactobacillus. If dried green onions and dried squid have undergone a simple drying process without substantial changes in their characteristics, they can be labeled as dried green onion, or green onion, and dried squid, or squid, respectively. This is about indication of raw material name. Raw materials refer to substances present in the final product. According to labeling regulations, all raw materials used in the product must be indicated. Therefore, all raw material names that constitute the filling solution, such as water, salt, acidity conditioner, etc., need to be listed. For alcohol as well, they should be listed as raw material names. However, if alcohol is removed through processes such as evaporation, they may not need to be listed. Raw materials refer to substances used in the manufacturing process that remain in the final product. Therefore, if oak chips are used during the smoking process, it is not necessary to label them as raw material names. There is no absolute requirement to indicate the quantity of raw materials used in the product. However, if raw material names are incorporated as part of the product name, indicated raw material names on the main display panel, or if specific labeling standards for different food types mandate the separate indication of both raw material names and quantities, then such information must be displayed. This is about composite raw material. In the context of indicating raw material names, as mentioned earlier, it's important to distinguish between composite raw materials and intermediates. Composite raw materials refer to those manufactured from two or more types of raw materials, which are then used as ingredients for other foods, and have been reported to or declared with government authorities for product reporting or import. The labeling method for composite raw materials is separately regulated. If raw materials are self-produced and used during the manufacturing of the final product, it falls under the category of intermediates. In such cases, the raw material names used during the food's production process must be displayed. For instance, if XX extract is an intermediate product containing ingredients A, B, and C, the raw material name should be indicated as A, B and C, or XX extract followed by parentheses as A, B and C. For composite raw materials, it is necessary to indicate the name denoting the composite raw material, the product name or the type of food, followed by parentheses. Inside the parentheses, it is required to list 5 or more raw material names in order of their prominence, excluding water. In case there are multiple ingredients tied for the 5th position, you have the option to either display one ingredient or list all the relevant ingredients tied for the 5th position. If the name of the 6th rank raw material within the composite raw material is included as part of the product name, the main display panel must present the quantity of that specific raw material of the 6th rank in a font size of 14 points or larger. However, there is no obligation to display the raw material name corresponding to the 6th rank within the composite raw material on the information display panel. When the content of composite raw materials in a product is less than 5%, only the name or food type of the composite raw material can be indicated. However, under the standards for labeling of foods, all food additives used in the product must be labeled. In cases where even if a food additive must be labeled due to the standards, if it is included in a composite raw material constituting less than 5% of the product, it can be indicated solely by the name or food type of the composite raw material, following the labeling method for composite raw materials. The labeling regulations for oligosaccharide products, under the standards for labeling of foods apply when oligosaccharide products are the final products sold to consumers, and do not apply to situations where oligosaccharide products are used as composite raw materials. Therefore, there is no requirement to indicate the individual content of oligosaccharide in this context. This is about labeling of food additives used in the product. In the standards for labeling of foods, different requirements are set for indicating information related to food additives. For food additives listed in Table 4, both the designated name and purpose are required to be displayed. For those listed in Table 5, only the designated name is required to be displayed. Additionally, for food additives specified in Table 6, either the designated name or the primary purpose must be indicated. In cases where an abbreviated name exists for the designated name specified in Table 4 and Table 5, the abbreviated name can be used instead of the designated name. Beta-carotene must be labeled with its name and purpose, and its purpose is strictly defined as coloring agent in standards for labeling of foods. However, in the standards and specifications for food additives, the primary purposes of beta-carotene are listed as nutrient fortification and coloring agent. If the product uses beta-carotene solely for nutrient fortification, it is possible to label it as beta-carotene followed by parentheses as nutrient fortification. If sodium sulfite is used for a purpose other than those specified in Table 4 as a bleaching agent, preservative, or antioxidant, it should be labeled using only the designated name of the food additive. as specified in the standards for food additives without indicating any specific purpose. This is about emphasis on ingredients. In the case of a product that has been reconstituted from diluted lemon concentrate to its original state, if the concentration of the reconstituted single raw material is over 100%, it can be labeled as 100%, even if the product contains food additives. In this case, it should be labeled as 100% lemon juice, and accompanied by parentheses, indicating the food additive's name or purpose, such as contains lemon flavor, etc. I will return to the fourth lecture. In the next lecture, we will learn about the first half of nutrition facts labeling. Thank you for listening. Please don't forget to subscribe and like.